Morning, Tuna.
Good morning.
So, we figured we're going to discuss freedom of speech today, which is probably one of the easiest topics we're ever going to address because we can easily discuss what it means and why it's important, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The reason why I brought it up because it's frustrating for me to see how freedom of speech is being used as a mean to do kind of dumb stuff, but also to suppress speech, freedom of speech, or to basically manipulate the idea of freedom of speech. So I think, as per usual, it would be good to discuss first what is freedom of speech and why is it important. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Um, I think the topic around freedom of speech is quite interesting because whenever it's been mentioned, it's always comparing uh, the West understanding of the freedom of speech to the understanding of freedom of speech in the East or somewhere in Africa. Um, a quick Wikipedia here is saying freedom of speech is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to actuate their opinion and ideas without fear of retaliation, which um, which makes sense. Um, but from my opinion, I also think there is no genuine freedom of speech. It cannot be 100% because if you give people the freedom of speech, there will be people abusing it, the freedom of speech. It's not saying they should not speak their mind and communicate, but there's always people trying to push some narrative or some ideas that are not good, but because they have the freedom of speech, they would want to use that opportunity to do something that is probably something we can consider as immoral, not technically illegal. It's illegal, but immoral, right? An example, for example, in the technology world, what I've seen so far, I believe the freedom of speech is kind of moderated in most applications that we use, like Facebook, Instagram, uh, maybe TikTok or something, uh, compared to something like Twitter. There is more freedom of speech on Twitter compared to other platforms. And on Twitter, I'm always scared of opening my Twitter application in public because it's filled with graphic content that is not appropriate in public. And I believe that is being pushed or being allowed because they want freedom of speech. And listening to one of the things that Elon mentioned in one of his interviews was it will allow anything on Twitter as long as it is legal. So that goes back to why I don't want to use Twitter in public, or because opening the app, you see a lot of graphic content which are not appropriate compared to all other apps. So there is good freedom of speech on Twitter, which is very good, but because it's extremely free, people are abusing that compared to all other platforms where there is a moderated freedom of speech and there is some control on what you can do and what you cannot do
Okay.
in that sense.
Um, this all makes sense. There are some assumptions that you are making, in my opinion, which I'd like to go over. And one of the assumptions is that you are seeing stuff that's being produced and shared by a person that's trying to use their speech to make a certain point. So one of the things I'm upset about is the fact that we are accepting the fact that freedom of speech is also for bots troll farms, other bad actors that don't really want to have freedom of speech, or even coming from a country without having freedom of speech themselves, but trying to enforce a certain way of looking at stuff by saying we're abusing your freedom of speech for our benefit while we don't have freedom of speech. Um, so the first thing I think is important for having true freedom of speech is knowing that the other person, I don't need to know their identity, I just need to know that the other person that is sharing their thoughts is actually a person from the same space as I am. What does it benefit me being flooded by Russian disinformation or Chinese troll farm stuff, and call it freedom of speech? I think these two have nothing to do with each other and are just clogging and clouding the whole discussion about freedom of speech. The other thing is, in the Netherlands, we don't talk about freedom of speech, but the freedom of opinion. What that means that um, you should be careful how you phrase what you think, because an opinion is something else than a fact. And what you also see is that the freedom of speech is being used to share stuff wrapped as a fact, while it's just an opinion. So, although in the Netherlands it's the same as in other countries, we at least have the whole discussion about freedom of speech, about the freedom of opinion, basically, which means that you can have an opinion and you can share your opinion and you won't be retaliated. But not all opinions are equal. So you don't have the right to be listened to. You don't have the right to be heard or that your opinion will have any impact. You just have the right to share your opinion. That's it. And you won't be retaliated, at least if you follow the law. So there's some discussion about, is the law suppressing freedom of speech? Um, I think it is, and I think it should, because, for example, in the Netherlands, but in Europe, we have a history with World War II, so you can't discuss certain topics from the Second World War or uh, be an outspoken fan of a certain dictator that led the whole European continent into uh, a war and destroyed 6 million Jews, for example. Stuff like that are not negotiable. And what you see now is that a lot of people that call themselves free speech absolutists, um, they say, well, we can have a different opinion on the war and what caused the war and what was the outcome of the war. So they use their opinion to rewrite history, which is also weird. I think we have a lot of facts that have been investigated and uh, been accepted for a long time as being the truth based on documentation and research and historic events. And now, because it doesn't suit us, or it doesn't suit some people, they say, well, it's my opinion that it's different, so my opinion is now a fact, and that's my freedom of speech. That whole chain of events is kind of destroying the whole idea of freedom of speech as well. So the first thing for me is, who are we talking to, and who do we allow on our? Um, if you compare it to the classic idea of the freedom of speech, is that you had a forum, which is the more Greek way of discussing, and in the forum people would gather, and you could stand up on a wooden box, and you would rise yourself a little bit above the crowd, and you would share your ideas to the crowd there. But everyone could see who was talking and everyone could see who was listening. And you could respond in person to the person talking, um, which is a open discussion, right? So if you say, well, whoever is going to stand up there and whoever or whatever the opinion is of the person standing on the box is going to be fine because we know this person is there. And I think some of the people standing on the box got no crowd, and some of the people standing on the box got a lot of people following them, and they could create a movement of some sort. That's the classic idea of the freedom of speech and the freedom of opinion. But now we don't know who's standing on the box. We don't know who the crowd is. Um, so sometimes you see a person standing on the box having an opinion, and it has apparently millions of followers and likes, which kind of says there's a big crowd on the square, on the town square, while in reality, the person screaming on the box is not a person but a bot, and the people cheering for the person on the box are also bots. So, and then you might be confused by the fact that this might be an opinion that is strongly supported. So you go like, oh well, maybe that's where we're going. So my frustration is this: if we really want to have freedom of speech, we need to make sure that we are listening to people that are talking to people. Unless we want to accept that freedom of speech is now degraded to freedom of noise. We don't know who's talking, we don't know who's listening, but it's our freedom not to know that or something. I don't know what it is, but it's not freedom of speech in my opinion. So enough for me for now. What are your thoughts on
Well,
this?
another form of abuse of the freedom of speech is what happens in some other countries where people talk against some people in power, and then they get probably arrested or killed or jailed or something like that. Those kind of situations, there's obviously no freedom of speech, so people are scared of to speak out or speak up against anything. And even in the West, there are a couple of conspiracy theories that you can that happen with excuse me, that people were speaking against probably some big companies or corporate or even the government, and they end up missing or labeled as crazy. So people don't believe or follow what they're saying. That is also not freedom of speech, even though they are not publicly arrested and put to prison or publicly uh, killed, but they are kind of silenced uh, in a private way. So and again, there are situations where if something happens, so for example, during COVID, there are a lot of people speaking about whatever they want to talk about, or even the is it this recent or still continuing wildfire in California? There are a lot of people speaking whatever they want to talk about. In that sense, there are people who are not speaking facts because probably nobody really knows what is going on until there are some investigations being done, right? But people will come up with their opinions, like you mentioned, and then spread it. In that sense, it could cause some issues. I'm thinking in the perspective of the government in this case. So the government might think out this person or group of people are pushing some ideas, and it could cause the government to lose control of the people. So they might find a way to silence or find a way to control people spreading misinformation when something bad happens. So in that sense, they're trying to control the freedom of speech. So technically, it's not really freedom. They're kind of limiting
Oh,
the freedom in this way.
okay. The thing is, for vaccinations, for example, we had a lot of people saying vaccination don't work, and they offered no proof for that. They just said it doesn't work, and they came up with some bullshit arguments. No research whatsoever, nothing. They just say it doesn't work, and then people went like, "Yeah, maybe it doesn't work. How do we know? It could not work. Maybe it is dangerous. How should we go?" And then vaccination went back. People stopped taking the vaccines. Um, Problems with diseases rose again. And then the question kind of comes up, is this freedom of speech? Or should it, as we call it in the Netherlands, freedom of opinion? Because if you would have an opinion on this, you would say, I don't think vaccines work. But they
But
say that
look at it this
vaccines
way.
work.
At that time, people believed what people were saying. So if you said a vaccine did not work, and I believe you, and I stopped taking
Yeah,
vaccines, and you said, and then people that got COVID around that time, a lot of people died because they did not get the vaccine or whatever, or they tried to use another medicine that were not
hmm,
approved because someone said it online and claimed they are a chiropractor, or is it chiropractor pronounced well? A doctor in that
hmm,
sense, and they know what medicine works for what. So there are a lot of people misleading millions of
yeah,
people online during that time. So giving people those kind of people the freedom of speech can cause more tragedy, death, sickness, in that sense. So, if you were in power, if you are the government, what would you recommend the government to do in that sense? Because
Well, for starters, on this topic, I would have a high standard of having an opinion versus sharing facts. So if you want to share facts, you'll have to be ready to support those facts. You cannot make up shit and then say it's true. I strongly believe we should rely on science-based stuff for medicine, for example. And there is a gray area, and you can walk in there. But for example, around and let's maybe the COVID vaccine is not the best example, but there is a lot of other vaccines that have been around for decades. We know they work. We've eradicated all kinds of medieval diseases, and now there are idiots saying they don't work, or you get autism or whatever. There's a lot of research being done there. There are a lot of experts, which are not tied to a political movement, that can tell you exactly how it works, why it works like that, and how we can prove it is like that. And we just decided not to trust them anymore because we have a different opinion on it, presented as a fact. I think we should have a low tolerance for that kind of bullshit. I think, on the other hand, if you have a strong opinion about vaccinations, you are allowed to share that. I mean, you should be sharing that. You should be saying, I have doubts about vaccines. I don't think they work. Or how is it that there's a lot of autism now, which wasn't there before the vaccines? And then you should ask people who might be able to share some light on these feelings and ideas you have to figure out how it is. But what happens now is that they surround themselves by people that are like-minded, also have no clue about science, for example, and then they go sharing that unrelated stuff as a fact, and they keep sharing that until the point that these medieval diseases start showing up again and wreaking havoc in childcare centers and stuff like that. I have personally have a quite a low tolerance about this, and I've discussed this topic with many friends that then always ask, but at the end, who's going to decide what is true? And that's the downside of this. If you are very
yeah,
firm on saying to people with an opinion presented as a fact that they're wrong and they should shut up, you are coming into an area where you're going to suppress people because you said we're only going to allow you to have this opinion when it's science backed, and then they don't have science and they don't know how to apply science because they have no clue how science works, but they do have a strong sense of their opinion. And then what can you do? Then give them a gag order or remove a social media platform completely because there's stuff happening
yeah,
there that you don't like. And the problem is that at the end, um, we need to seek for the adults in the room because this is basically a discussion we should have. And and what quite often happens is that there's going to be a fight over I want to have the right to share my bullshit, and I'm gonna make it my I don't know what my crusade to share my bullshit. Um, and then they have followers because they're disappointed people, or there are people that don't understand, or there are people that had a bad experience, or they lost faith in the government, or whatever reason they have to follow them. So this is absolutely the hardest part of the whole discussion. Where do you draw the line? I mean, suppressing people with
that's the point I was trying to make,
yeah,
right? When there's freedom of speech, there are people that will abuse it, and when those people start abusing the freedom of speech and spreading misinformation, what is the proper step in trying to control the misinformation and leading people in the wrong path, right? I mean, every everything that is wrong with the world today came from somebody saying something that is not true or not right, and people believing
yeah,
them and going with it. So if that is the leading cause of the problem we have today, then freedom of speech is not, or freedom of opinion is not, probably not something we should aim for. And the way to control that opinion before it goes out of hand is the complicated part. Some other countries like I don't know, uh, like China, I don't know how they actually do it, but we've been told that they don't have freedom of speech and everything is censored and everything, right? But in the past 1 week, where all the Americans have been using red notes now and discussing more with the Chinese, they realize the Chinese actually will have more freedom of speech. They have better quality of life. They have a lot of things that the Americans don't have. So, in that sense, the Americans do not um, no, I would say there is some limit in each country, each community in terms of what they can or cannot share. So it is kind of being controlled. So you look at the environment where you are and see what majority of the people believe in and try to control what you say. And I think that is the way we kind of been programming ourselves to control what we say. Because unless you want to start up an argument, right? If you want to start up an argument, you go to people that are against what you believe, and then you drop a bomb, and then there's a crisis that will spring up from that. So freedom of speech again is good. However, there are bad players that will abuse it and then cause more chaos.
Well,
Controlling it
that's
is the
that's
problem.
why if it's something we can actually do, that's the second step. But I think it would be good to hold platforms that allow discussion to happen accountable for what's happening on the platform. And that's the whole thing where the American tech giants that now bought an election in the US are kind of fighting against because they don't want to be held accountable. They just want to have an open platform where everything is allowed, where I don't think it will at the end benefit themselves actually, because this could also easily turn on them. In the meanwhile, you also see that they are using their platform for monetization and geopolitics. So it's not really that they are actually doing it, but they're only doing it when it benefits them. So the transparency there is gone. It's quite obvious that this is being used as a means and not as a true forum of discussion. So I think that's something in Europe we can do better by holding these platforms accountable. The other thing is that we should work towards a way. A big problem in cybersecurity is identity. So this is not a social media problem, but this is a problem that we have uh, throughout the internet. How do we know who are we are talking to? Because if you are looking at a customer, for example, or someone wants to use your system, you need to know. The previous times we had this "I'm not a robot" kind of thing, but with AI, it's going to be impossible. So, for example, I opened a bank account recently, and I had to keep my camera in my face, and then move my face, and then
Mhm.
wave my hand in front of it. They're trying to detect if I'm not an AI. This will work for a little bit, but this will stop working soon. So we all agree in cybersecurity world, identity is going to be a problem because we are not able to verify my identity or your identity or that of a third-party bot soon. And that's the same with social media platforms. We have no idea what's happening there and who's on there. And concerning freedom of speech, for example, in China, I bet they can have strong opinions on the West, but they won't have a strong opinion on their own country. Because if they would have,
Yep.
they would reduce their chances of their children getting a good job by the minute they talk about China. And we know that, right? If you start a company there, you will get a party member when you grow into a larger company that will control and check and verify what's happening within the company. It won't interfere with what you're doing. It will just listen into the discussions. It will just read the board notes. It's a party member, part of the company that will make sure that you are working towards the common goal of China, which is basically a pretty awesome system because everyone is working towards the glory of China. But to
Yeah.
call that free is for me is a bit far fetched because it's only free within the boundary they made, and their boundary is quite small. And I think boundaries in Western countries are larger, so you can discuss more. For example, your own country. The downside is that it allows a lot of um, people from inside your country, but also outside your country, to discuss a lot of bullshit. So the thin line because between not being able to discuss anything and discussing stuff based on, for example, healthcare system. This is one of the things that's mind-boggling to me. The Dutch healthcare system is one of the best in the world. We always score like in the top five or top three of healthcare systems in the world, and we are competing against Sweden or Norway or Denmark or countries like that, or maybe sometimes Singapore comes up. But it's all first-grade healthcare systems. In the Netherlands, the people have been thinking because of social media and because of some political parties that our healthcare system is broken. It's complete crap. It's absolutely terrible. There are waiting lists everywhere, and people are dying, and it's just so terrible. And obviously, we have our challenges. We have a population that's becoming older. We have less people that are capable and able to work in healthcare themselves. So we are standing before a big issue. But between the fact that we have a great healthcare system and we need to protect it to keep it great, and the fact that we are saying it's already terrible and we've thrown it away and it's all because of the immigrants or whatever reason they come up with, it kind of destroys the actual thing we want to achieve, and that's discussing how we're going to fix it. And that's the thing with a lot of the free speech discussion. You only get the extremes because it's terrible. While it's great, it's proven to be great. It still is, even though we have challenges. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but compared to the rest of the world, it's kind of good. Um, but we need to keep it good. So how are we going to do that? Not by saying it's terrible, right? So how are we going to truly move back into the middle a little bit and not make it a political statement and just scream and yell it's bad, but just say, okay, we have some challenges. How are we going to face them? And obviously, there are a bunch of places where we discuss this. If you go to a congress about healthcare, I've been to a few, and then there's an ongoing discussion on how we're going to keep healthcare affordable, how we're going to keep the quality high, how we're going to keep people's quality of life good. These are all things that are being discussed there, and they want to include technology. And then they had a robot on the stage that could help you with some healthcare tasks because we don't have people, so we have a nice looking robot. Whatever, it's all there. We're working on it, but in the territory of free speech, it's nothing like this. There's no nuance. There's no solution. It's just terrible. It's you know, um, and I
Yeah.
wonder how can we, as a society, actually solve our issues when we allow this to happen. So
I think a lot of these discussions are politically targeted. So an opposition party trying to push an agenda that the current party is not doing their job. So they spread or sponsor people to spread some misinformation. Individuals also try to, be famous or look like they are an active member of the community and find a way to uh, instigate some fears because fears spread faster than when you say something is going well. Nobody cares if something is going well. So you say something is wrong, then people need to wake up. So those kind of things are what makes freedom of speech quite dangerous. Um, so, and I do think uh, having freedom of speech is not bad, but maybe I also don't think no country has figured as a perfect system to protect the freedom of speech and also make sure that the information or opinion being shared is correct, or at least control the narrative without going to the extreme of, you know, uh, arresting and putting people in jail because they spoke up their mind, or just giving them the freedom to speak whatever they want to speak and then spread some as many misinformation as much as they want to spread. I think both has not figured out the best ways. And I think one of the things we could probably do is to educate. But even if we educate, most people will still come up and say you have been brainwashed because of the kind of education. But if I think if you're being educated, a lot of people will have clear understanding of what is going on and find a better way to control what they read or listen to from other sources and compare it to what is coming from the main source, which is probably from the government in this sense, and see which one makes sense. Of course, the government is all, we always say everything is good and there is no problem and you should do this, and the other side will say you should do the opposite. But um, if we put educating the public as a long-term goal and not just when there's an incident, then you start pushing out some information and say, oh, you should do this or you should do that. If people are well educated, there will be less propaganda, there will be less misinformation, there will be less uh, BS running around from people, in my opinion.
Yeah. Uh,
Do you?
yeah.
Yeah, I was asking if you
Yeah, yeah.
reckon with
I
that.
think education. That's why the reason why people that really want to have a lot of followers based on bullshit attack the science and the academics and the schooling community a lot and try to discredit them by being biased and that's why in discussions between people with opinions and people with facts, you always see that the opinion looks great because it's very strong. Vaccines will work. Prove me wrong. And then the academic will say, well, we did research and we found out, and in 98% of, oh, you see, in 2% of the, you even say that doesn't work. And that's the thing with science is very nuanced. They know their shortcomings. They know how well the research worked and what needs to be researched and what we don't know, because the adagium of the more you know, the more you know you don't know, for example, um, that works. Uh, oh, oh yeah, there you are. Your image froze for a second. But so yeah, I think critical thinking, allowing people to understand how it works to find facts and how to get information and evaluate information and verify it, or even do some research yourself, some actual research, not some. I found a page on Facebook that that really says what I want to hear, but especially the moment where you figure out you're wrong and that you can change your mind, stuff like that. I think that's very important, and we need to teach people that. But what you see in some Western countries is that there is a very strong uh, push on the educative system where they start educating non-science backed stuff from a religion, or start educating children from home because they are afraid of something they call the woke agenda. Uh, that's just insane. It's just a reason to dumb down and to keep the peasants very stupid and very complacent. While at the end, if you are really a fan of free speech, you should also be a fan of um, uh, understanding research, understanding how to distill facts. Um, but I do think that a lot of people don't really want to know the actual truth. They just want to uh, have uh, their whole system of beliefs being supported.
Well, another problem I see is I don't blame people that don't believe whatever the government is trying to teach or basically they want trying to pass across to the people. Because a lot of time the government has been caught doing saying this and doing the opposite. An example, I would say, if we use the COVID time as an example, uh, the number of deaths reported in all the countries were not actually caused by COVID. Though they had COVID, but they had underlying issues, right? And then they had COVID on top, and then they died. But they didn't die because of COVID. And when they are logging the death of the person, they put death by COVID instead of the underlying issues that they had. Almost everybody that I know that had COVID without any critical medical issues were okay after 2, 3 weeks. But others with more severe issues uh, had to pass away, unfortunately. So a lot of times when things like this happen, it brings distrust from the public because they don't trust the government based on recent events or what they've done in the past or how they've tried to manipulate the public to believe some narrative, either for the good or either for the bad. Nobody knows. An example would be the aliens. There's been a lot of propaganda or what's it called? Um, Conspiracy about aliens for years, for decades. And the government have been saying there's no aliens, there's no aliens, there's no aliens. Until last year, in death, they said there are aliens. So
Well,
why hide it from us? These kind of things make people don't
okay,
want to
I think
believe the
there are two
government.
separate things you just mentioned. In the Netherlands, the fact on the reporting of the COVID deaths went the same, but they didn't hide that it was someone with underlying issues and COVID. They just said we cannot distinguish the reason of death yet. So they indeed had, I don't know, a very big illness and they had COVID and now they're dead. The symptoms of COVID didn't really help, so we write them down as a COVID death. They might have survived without COVID, right? So that's a bit of the gray area, but they didn't
Mhm.
make a secret out of it. The only one that pretended that it was a secret was the group of people that trying to undermine the government in their efforts to contain the virus. I think in the Netherlands, especially the first year, we went all in to provide everyone with everything we knew. But the downside was it also showed what we didn't know. So a lot of the things we didn't know, and that later in a later stage the compliancy lowered or actually dropped. So people weren't as happy to stay at home and be in a lockdown when you saw that the sharing of information became a little bit more focused on keeping people compliant and scaring the shit out of them to keep them stay at home. So there you see that they started to manipulate the situation a little bit to keep the crowd under control, which is maybe not great for the confidence in the government, but yeah, uh, I don't know. The hospitals were full. They couldn't handle all the people with COVID. So what do you do? It's not to say that it's good, but it's also not per se bad. It's and they're still doing research uh, uh, on that topic as we speak. So it's not this discussion in the Netherlands, for example, is not over because they still want to learn. Uh, the alien stuff is interesting because they, I think they didn't say they actually are aliens. They did say they are UFOs, right? So it's the UFO discussion. So they say we have indeed recorded UFOs, which we couldn't explain. Um, but they didn't say we actually shook hands with an alien, right? Or we actually saw alien people running around or something. Or did they? Then I missed that. But I thought it was about the UFOs.
You mean the
Yeah.
information last year about the? Yeah, I not really clear. I didn't really follow it, but they agreed that they've intercepted aliens a couple of times. I'm not sure they went into details of actually
Mm,
having communication between them or not. Um, but they agreed that they are present either in this planet and they are under the oceans. They are more specific as compared to in the past where they totally denied it, and even the sitting
mm,
president were denying it and all those kind of things. So these kind of situations make people not
yeah.
trust the government in some sense. So, and that gives power to people that spread misinformation because if you don't trust the government, of course, you're going to trust somebody
But
else
this
that
is
is
quite
spreading
simple. I mean,
whatever
the
they are
government
spreading.
always looks at what if we. I mean, when we didn't have television yet, they had the plays on the radio, and we all know what happened with the play on War of the Worlds when it was broadcast on radio. You know that story? So
Mm.
there's this. Okay, I'm gonna tell you for
Mm.
the ones that you already know it, but our listeners, our one listener doesn't know that. So in the 1920s or something, they broadcast a play called War of the Worlds, and it's about an alien invasion. It's a book, and there's recently we had movies about it. But it is about aliens coming down, and they harvest people, and they use them to farm, and the people are the resource, and then after a while, the whole planet get covered under alien biomass, And well, the spoiler alert here is that at the end, the alien biology wasn't capable of dealing with the the earthly bacteria and viruses, so it died and the humans prevailed. But it was not because of the humans; it was because of our own biology or something. Anyway, so the classic story of War of the Worlds was being presented as a role play on national radio. So they what they did back then to entertain people was read books and stuff like that and have role plays, and you could listen to it. And they did, and people thought it was real. It was happening. So there was a big panic breaking out, and a lot of people were running down the street and going yelling, "We're under attack!" and there's an alien invasion, and there was mayhem apparently. Obviously, I wasn't there, but this is this story has been told. And the thing is that if you don't understand stuff, it can cause panic. So I think governments have been hiding a lot of stuff, like UFO sightings, for us, because they didn't understand themselves, because it could leverage a certain power. So if you share the information your with the people in your country, you also share it with your enemies. So maybe they didn't want to share it with China or Russia or whatever, um, and they keep it secret. So there are many reasons that are maybe valid uh, to keep this a secret. I don't know why they shared it last year. I think it had to do with opening of files that had been sealed, and then they opened up, and then they had to shed light on the fact that they had a lot of UFO sightings that they couldn't explain, and they still have UFO sightings. And the funny thing is also that the most UFO sightings are being recorded above the United States of America. So apparently they're very good at the sightings of UFOs, UFOs, and maybe there are UFO sightings in other parts of the country of the world as well, but they're being hidden. You know. So this is a bit of the problem where the freedom of information, the freedom of speech is not everywhere the same. So you can really compare that. But I also think that in the light of history or the light of the impact of sharing that information, it's interesting to understand why they kept that hidden. I understand that it's troubling for people not knowing everything and having a feeling that the government is hiding stuff for them. On the other hand, if we want the government to keep us safe and protect us and make sure that everything is in our best interest, we should also have a bit of faith in the fact that they are actually doing this for our benefit and not to suppress conspiracy theorists that always said there was UFOs, um, but that they did it for other reasons. I don't know. There's somewhere also a gray area, and the same with the vaccination stuff that um, yeah, they also have to do marketing. So I don't think the
Yeah.
people that are screaming and yelling that we should have more free speech right now, like Musk or Trump or Zuckerberg, that they are particularly open about their motives, that they are particularly overly sharing their personal interests and stuff. Absolutely not. They're only doing the only thing they're doing is blaming it on others, that they should be open and they should be sharing, and that their free speech just means that they can share a lot of bogus, provable bogus. Even on the community notes on Musk, he gets corrected by his own followers. I mean, he's the main source of bullshit in the world right now. He's also the richest man, so that makes it a problem. If he was the poorest man on earth, no one would bat an eye. But he's also
Yeah, no one will
the most
care.
the rich person on the planet. So that's the interesting part here. But I agree. These are, I mean, time will
Yeah,
tell. I could be wrong. It could be that the government has really abused their position to suppress us as a civilian. But it could also that it was in our interest.
I am I am 100% sure every not really like abuse, but uh manipulative. Every person in power has manipulated the information they put out in one way or the other, either
Yeah,
to for the good or for the bad, to control the population. Because I also understand during the time when they discovered the aliens, I don't know when exactly, but during those time, probably there is a fear that if people know, there will be some crisis and people would a lot of things will happen. I remember there was a time when I don't remember exactly. In Nigeria, there was a time when people thought there would be rapture, and it's the end of the world, and people will go to heaven and stuff like that. People got that information, and some people started killing each other because they believed if they kill someone, they might go to heaven. Some people started selling off their properties because they want to use their money to buy heaven, or don't want to have any other property or spend all their money because they only have a few months left before they go to heaven, so they want to enjoy
Yeah, yeah,
the remaining life they have
yeah.
before the rapture comes. So those kind of misinformation, um, at some point, if the government were able to intercept it before it spreads, they would prefer to control it. Those are some cases where they were unable to control it, but most of the times they were able to control some information by doing whatever they need to do and manipulate the narrative and spread some order and divert the direction of the population into another place because they believe if they actually have the full information, they might react in a very bad way. So I'm sure every government has done that, either
Uh,
good or bad.
yeah. I mean, yeah, they probably would. Um, and then the whole thing comes back to whether how bad we think it is, or are we able to keep or hold our governments accountable? I think yeah. I think the Dutch government in particular has
Yeah.
a bunch of examples where not so much the actual government, but like the IRS, the Dutch IRS, we had a big thing where we were hunting fraudulent people, and they overdid it. So they kind of destroyed the lives of people that made um, errors in their tax stuff, and then they were marked as fraudulent, and they got the full force of the IRS on them, and they had to pay fines, and they got in trouble. People lost their houses, and relationships got broken, and they got financial downfall by being marked as fraudulent. And even though if they were fraudulent, they would probably try to dodge a few thousand euros of tax payments, and then they get tens of thousands of euros of damage by the IRS. So this has been a big issue where the
Mm.
government wasn't, as we call the IRS, part of the government, not trustworthy at all, and they wanted to hunt down fraud so badly that they didn't even care about who they destroyed in the process. And then you see, as a civilian, there's only so much you can do against a government body like the IRS. Um, they can really, really
Yeah.
destroy your whole life. So these are examples that doesn't really help the Dutch people having faith in the government. And that's the same with we have a gas thing, which in previously since the 1970s, we've been extracting gas from gas fields underneath a certain part of the country. But if you extract the gas, they pump in some other stuff in to keep the pressure in the soil the same, but it caused differences. So we had some earthquakes in that area, and a lot of houses got damaged by those earthquakes, and these earthquakes were being yeah, made basically by extracting gas from the soil and handling the damages from uh, the gas extraction have taken decades. They messed it up like multiple times. People were living in houses scared that it would crash and
Mm.
with cracks in their walls. And those are examples. If you are part of that and you're living in that area, you have a house you can't sell because no one wants to live there anymore because of the earthquakes, and you have damages. And this really, there people are afraid of sleeping in their bedroom because they're afraid of the houses collapsing. And houses didn't really collapse; they just got damaged. But still, this is just when the government is so slow and so inadequate, um, then you lose faith.
Yeah.
And these are fine examples of the government messing up in a big way because I think the amount of money they spend on discussing what to do with the earthquake victims superseded the amount of money they had to pay to rebuild all the houses by now. So they messed up in multiple ways, not only
Yeah.
the loss of faith of people, but also From the economic perspective, this is just bullshit behavior. So I think these are examples that should be the roadmap not to go there anymore. But in the meanwhile, uh, government wouldn't be government if they all say, no, no, we shouldn't be doing this ever again. And it's still happening. I mean, the earthquake victims stuff isn't fixed completely yet, and the IRS victims are not compensated. They now said it would take them another 3 years to solve that or something, which is insane, right? These people, this is going around for 5 years. So imagine having your life being destroyed and
Wow,
then they take like 8 years to fix it. Yeah, we don't have that much time. Yeah, it's horrible. So
that's
a lot of
horrible.
things are going
Yeah,
quite well in the Netherlands, but we have enough examples of the Dutch government messing up in a very, very big way, and which makes lose of faith and trust uh, yeah, sensible. But yeah,
yeah. It's quite difficult to control a large population and give them or provide them a way to have the same belief system and understand the situation. I think it's also one of the reasons why there are religions. So people will believe in something and have the same idea, and religion kind of give put people in the same perspective. I believe if there are no religions, there will be a lot more diversity in
we have
opinions
this issue in the
today.
Netherlands. We have a low grade of
Uh,
religion, and there is the common denominator and the glue that kept the society together. I mean, you have laws, and laws just arrange the basic stuff, and then you have culture, and culture is also
mm,
made up of religion. So if you don't have religion, what is your culture? What is our common belief system? What are our values, and how do we share that? So there is
yeah,
a pretty large philosophical discussion here that without a shared belief system, what makes us Dutch? What does it mean to be here? And the downside of not having a religion is losing that, and not being able to fill it in makes it that people can do and be whatever they want apparently, which causes all kinds of new challenges because maybe not everyone wants to accept everyone
yeah,
being anything. I identify as a tree, for example, and then suddenly you get, but you're not a tree, you're a human. But I want you to respect my point of view because I believe that I'm a tree. Okay, that's fine, but you want me to water your feet or what? What's next? This is a situation that has become a little bit awkward but also impossible. So having at
yeah,
least somewhat of a common belief system where we share some of the values and uh, therefore we have a morale system and we have a way of dealing with each other and respecting each other makes sense. So if it's not going to be religion, we'll have to find something else. I think we're in the process of learning how to do that. I think that's the whole thing we're seeing right now with the abundance of individual beliefs. So I think another thing that is being proven by science quite a lot is that the fact that we are losing our shared belief system and we're moving into individualism makes us unhappy. So having a community to be part of is actually one of the larger reasons why people are happy. So I understand that when there are
yeah,
political parties that are very strong on this belief system and they're actually very religious, that there, a lot of people are clanging on to it. They would just go like, oh, this is a community, I can be part of it. They give clarity of what to do and what to believe and when to do it. It's helpful, we like to be guided as a human species. So yeah, I'm
mm,
not pleading here for religion. I'm not a religious person myself in that sense that I want to go to church, for example, but I do really understand the value of it, and I do really think that having a shared value system is helpful. For example, I grew up in the Netherlands, which is a Christian from
yeah,
from the heritage is Christian country. So we have a lot of Christian beliefs that are still so in a certain sense I'm a Christian because I grew up in a Christian culture, right? So we all carry that. But if it erodes and we all lose our faith and we're no longer a Christian country, what are we? What's next? We are Dutch. Is that a belief? It's not. It's a nationality. So So we struggle with this. I think this is one of the parts
Yeah.
where our identity is being troubled a little bit. But I also believe that we'll figure it out. We'll build a new set of things. I kind of hope. Otherwise, it could become messy.
Uh, well, maybe in another generation, but not in
Maybe not.
the
We'll
next decade or two.
we'll see. You see that worldwide religion is still very strong. So I think that's a proof.
I don't think it's strong
It is.
worldwide.
Okay.
It's getting weaker by the day.
Hmm.
Yes, it is getting weaker and weaker. Every religion. I think we have thousands of them right now. So uh, most people that I know, or most countries that you would think are very religious. For example, if you go to Southeast Asia, like Thailand or Vietnam or Cambodia, you think they are Buddhist countries, right? And they are very religious in that sense. But if you ask most people in that country, they don't believe in anything. It's their grandparents that are Buddhists. The newer
Okay.
generations
Yeah.
don't believe in anything. They are just
We
free.
believe in
So
capitalism. Earn money, buy shit we don't
um,
need to impress people we don't like.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We are 1 minute away from a 1 hour podcast. So congratulations, we managed to fill up another hour of interesting talks. But I'm gonna wrap this up if you don't mind.
It's,
Uh, Thanks for this. I love
yeah,
this one.
sure.
It was I love all of our talks, but this one I was a bit afraid of going into it, but I think we touched a lot, and I think free speech well it gave me a lot of to think about, and
It's more
it's
complicated than
very
we think.
complicated, and I think uh,
Yeah.
looking at it from the different perspectives helped me at least, and I hope our listener will be interested in this as well. I'll let you know. All right, thanks a lot, and talk to you later. All
All
right,
right.
bye bye.
Thank you.